Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news as we close out the year 2024. It's been great to be with you all year. Great to be with you today. Joining us coming up in about half an hour now, Joe DiGenova will be here. He is the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. He'll react to the current U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia announcing his resignation. We'll get Joe DiGenova on that. Can't wait to hear from him. Eddie Scarry joins us, columnist for The Federalist. That's at 4 o'clock. He'll talk about the biggest loser of the year. He's got a pick. Do you? Ed Morrissey will be with us coming up at 4:30 from Hot Air as we talk about all that money that Joe Biden wasted on projects that were never done. And then E.J. Antoni, our in-house economist, is here to recap the economy under Joe Biden and what to expect under President Donald Trump. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It's New Year's Eve, which means we are 20 days away now from the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Everybody looking forward to that. We got to get out from under the Biden economy. Big time. One of the things we're going to talk about with EJ today are these awful news related to credit cards. You know by now, if you listen to this program, we talk about it as a really important and unsatisfactory data point that credit card debt is well over $1 trillion in the United States, and it's at record levels, which is just as awful as it can be. It's a real sign of the state of our economy and how things are not going well. In other words, people don't have money in their bank accounts. It's not that people are being reckless with credit, although some are, but a lot of this is just they can't make ends meet and they're looking for lifelines. And unfortunately, they're falling into the traps of some of these credit cards. And now credit card defaults have reached their highest level in 14 years. This is according to a Financial Times report this week, that during the first 9 months of 2024, lenders wrote off more than $46 billion in seriously delinquent credit card loans, according to the Financial Times here. And it was data that was analyzed by a group called Bank Reg Data. That's a 50% increase from the first 3 quarters of 2023, and it's the highest since the Obama administration back in 2010. So that's have you noticed where we reach these high water marks of crappy economies? They're under these Democrat presidents. Under Obama, you have this awful situation where people are all defaulting on their credit cards, and then again here, well into the Biden presidency. You can't. It's not like you can look at this and go, "Oh, it was Trump's fault. Trump did that." No, this is Biden's. Biden owns this. In nearly his entire time in office accounted for here, and the first 3 quarters of the year lead to the highest increase in well over a decade since the Obama administration of credit card defaults. Mark Zandi, head of Moody's Analytics, telling the Financial Times that, quote, high-income households are fine, but the bottom third of U.S. consumers are tapped out. Their savings rate right now is zero. Zero. The bottom third of Americans have nothing in their savings account, according to Moody's Analytics. Not a good situation, which is why so many people voted for Trump and are looking forward to him arriving as president of the United States come January 20th. This is an awful period, too, because, you know, Joe Biden is pulling out all the stops to make it as miserable as possible, it seems like. Today, the Biden administration determined that they will not be executing Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the 9/11 mastermind. That was the plan all along. People noticed it, so they tried to backtrack for a moment. They pretended like they were going to backtrack, and sure enough, they're not backtracking at all. Today, Axios headline, Pentagon Appeals Court upholds plea deal for 9/11 orchestrator. Upholds plea deal for 9/11 orchestrator. And put differently, they're not going to execute him. A Pentagon appeals court on Monday ruled that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin overstepped when he revoked a plea deal that prosecutors had reached with 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. After months of back and forth over the plea agreement, the ruling puts the proceedings back on track for a potential guilty plea hearing next week, the New York Times is reporting. Mohammed and two other 9/11 plotters reached plea deals with the Pentagon in late July for their roles in that terror attack that killed almost 3,000 Americans. The three men had been facing the death penalty. Under the deal, they agreed to plead guilty to war crimes in exchange for life sentences, per the New York Times. So there you go. Didn't Biden just commute a bunch of sentences? He granted clemency, commutations to a bunch of people on death row. In fact, every single person on death row received clemency except for three. Remember that? It was the Tree of Life synagogue shooter. It was the shooter at that church in South Carolina. It was basically, he picked a couple of big news item killers, and then he said, you still will be executed. You'll still be executed. And yet, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is not on that list. Of all of the people who you might consider eligible for execution in the United States, in U.S. custody, the guy behind 9/11, off the table, according to the Biden administration now. He gets to walk. He gets to walk. Well, he stays life in prison, but he is not going to be subjected to the death penalty. What message does this send? Why is it the left sends all of the opposite messages of what you should be sending, especially as it relates to criminal justice? No consequences for hardened criminals, no consequences for terrorists. Daniel Penny is subjected to prosecution for defending people on a train, which leads to, of course, people standing by as an illegal alien lights a woman on fire on a subway, and nobody does anything. Don't want to be the next Daniel Penny. Don't want to help and have your life turned upside down. So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, life sentence is the plea deal. No death penalty for him. Lloyd Austin, the Axios notes, revoked the agreement in early August after news of the deal was met with outrage from families of the victims and some Republicans. Why is it just Republicans? His decision set in motion another round of litigation. In November, a military judge ruled that the plea agreements for the three defendants were valid. The U.S. Court of Military Commission noted Tuesday that as of the previous day, the court had denied the government's writ of mandamus and prohibition in the case of Mohammed and his co-defendants. The appeals panel wrote in the decision that Austin did not have the authority to revoke the deals because the defendants had already started performance of the pretrial agreements, the Times reported. The Pentagon did not immediately respond to Axios' request for comment Tuesday. Prosecutors at the Pentagon will now have to decide whether to appeal the decision over the plea agreements via a higher court of appeal or proceed with plea-taking proceedings next month. All right, here I have a technical question here that I don't readily have the answer to off the top of my head, but isn't the military justice system entirely under the Pentagon's control? This is not like it's the judicial branch of the government. It's still a part of the executive branch. Can't somebody up the chain say, to hell with all of this, the plea deal is off, he gets the chair? And forget the technical details for a moment. Let's just go back in time long enough to say, why did this happen in the first place? Why 9/11/2001 we are now approaching 25 years ago. 24 years ago. We'll be, as of next September. And we still haven't settled this thing? We can get Donald Trump into a persecution trial in no time, but we can't get Khalid Sheikh Mohammed into trial? And we're at the plea phase where he's pleading guilty to an event that he brags about committing, which is the terror attack on September 11th. And the Biden administration is taking the death penalty off the table. Some idiot in the Pentagon said, okay, if you plead guilty, as if we didn't have literal mountains of evidence. As if, what? Who agreed to that? Who even thought that this made any sense whatsoever? And so here we are. Now a military appeals court saying that Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, lacked the authority to intervene, which, by the way, he only intervened after You and I noticed what was going on. After the 9/11 families especially noticed what was going on. Doesn't have the authority. So we got to keep KSM and his co-conspirators in prison for life at best. But death penalty, off the table. Off the table. Just insanity. How many disgraceful headlines can they pile up before they hit the exits? This is the latest one. So Hunter Biden gets an 11-year pardon, no accountability, and that's for things that we're not even aware of. 11 years. That time period encapsulates an entire era of things that we're not even aware of yet. But Biden knew, Joe knew, the family knew, Jill knew that Hunter's going to need 11 years specifically. So let's do that. They did 11 years. All of the people on death row, not on death row anymore. Unless, of course, unless the media focused intensely on your murders, on the murders you committed, your homicides, then those 3 people are going to continue to be executed. But the rest of those 40, 37 of them, nope, no death penalty for you anymore. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, no death penalty for him. We're not even at trial yet. He hasn't even been convicted. We're in the plea phase. The absurdities just keep piling up. Joe Biden spent much of his presidency on vacation. We have new data on this subject today. Biden spent a quarter, as we look back on 2024, he spent a quarter of this year out of office on vacation. Out of office on vacation. 2024. 24% specifically in Delaware at Camp David or in other vacation spots. He spent 89 full and partial days out of the White House in 2024, not counting days he was taking foreign trips for so-called official business. The president's time out of the office increased after he dropped out of the presidential race, spending a total of 46 full or partial days in Delaware, Camp David, St. Croix, Nantucket, California. That was from August until the end of the year. Holy cow. Just since August, he's been to all of those places. I mean, I've gotten away from the office every so often. Not that much. Nowhere near that much. And not to those destinations. Yeah. So that's 24%. Now, in past years, he took more vacation. Remember, he was out almost every weekend in Delaware. The number that we remember hearing all the time was 40% of his presidency spent on vacation away from the White House. And, of course, Karine Jean-Pierre, what was her excuse every time that happened? Oh, well, he's president anywhere he goes. The whole office travels with him. He's just working. And then cut to the one photo we see of him, and it's him slumped over in a beach chair, right, in Delaware, and looking sad. Just look, not the image that you want to project to the rest of the world. Just like melting into a beach chair, and as Donald Trump said, he couldn't even pick it up. If he wanted to pick up the chair, he couldn't pick it up, given his frail state. But here's the unusual take I have on this particular subject. I wish he was on vacation more. And when I say him, I don't just mean him. I mean all of the people who were calling the shots for him. I wish they were all on vacation. So long as they're going to have the levers of power, I'd like them to be away from them. Less pulling on those, please. Because when they do, what do we get? We get the crappy economy. We get the open border. We get the wasteful spending. We get the death row people all, released from their consequences. We get Hunter Biden with an 11-year pardon. We get Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of September 11th, 2001, gets away without a death penalty for him. And he hasn't even gone to trial yet. That's where we are. I'm excited for the new year. I think it'll bring good things. I'm hoping anyway. We'll have EJ and Tony talk about the economy and what to expect with President Trump getting back in office. Hopefully more of the same. In other words, more of the Trump era economy. I'd like to bring that back. It's so funny. I was just talking to Corey about exercise, and this year, one of the big things that I've been focusing on is just getting back to the gym. It's just been decades since I really hit it hard, and so this year I really did. And I'm one of those guys who's like, I didn't want to do it close to January 1st because it just feels like it has a built-in expiration date if you do it like right at New Year's, that you're like quietly wondering to yourself, am I one of those? Am I one of those? Do I go to the gym and then I fall off completely? But I'm here to tell you, I don't think it matters now. Now, in my head now, just do it. If you're not doing it right now and you're thinking about it at all, go for it. You're going to feel a million times better. I do. I feel so much better. Just about literally everything. It's funny that you can already see the New Year's Day crowd beginning to grow. It's not quite New Year's, so I think some people are showing up like a few days early to make it so that, no, I'm not a part of that New Year's crowd. I've been here since before New Year's. I've noticed, you go to the gym with some regularity. You know all the regulars. Everyone, you give each other polite nods as you walk by. Yep, see you every day. Yep, see you every day. All of a sudden, a bunch of new people are showing up, which is great. I actually think that the whole country should get swole. That's my New Year's hope, that everyone just get in great shape. I love this Make America Healthy Again trend because, as a country, we really should be able to whoop some tail. And just get everybody back out there. It's good for you physically, good for you mentally, good for you emotionally. It's the best. It's the best. I can't recommend it enough. So part of the reason I'm telling you this is so I can, remind myself to stick with it, which I will now, because we had this exchange among one another. Man, 2024. At least some good things happened in 2024. All right, hey, coming up, we're going to talk to our good friend Joe DiGenova. He's the former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. And boy, does he have some thoughts about the current guy in that role. He announced his resignation. He wants to get out before Trump gets in. Joe will tell us why that guy should have never been in the job in the first place. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Eddie Scarry joins us from the Federalist at 4 o'clock. Ed Morrissey is here at 4:30 from Hot Air. And then our in-house economist, E.J. Antoni, joins us at 5:30. You, as always, are welcome to join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. So many Americans have suffered under the tyranny of the Biden Department of Justice. And one of the leading henchmen behind all of that chaos has been the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, a guy by the name of Matthew Graves, who yesterday announced that he will be resigning from his position effective January 16th. That's, of course, just 4 days before President Trump returns to office. The Justice Department and Matt Graves have been bragging about the Trump voters whose lives they destroyed. Over 1,500 January 6 defendants have had their lives upended by Matthew Graves, and the Justice Department describes that as defending democracy when, of course, they're doing nothing but attacking it. Joining us now to react to this news is a man who once served in that position, the former U.S. Attorney to the District of Columbia, Joe DiGenova, back on the show. Joe, Happy New Year to you. Always good to talk to you, sir.
Happy New Year, Vince. Great to talk to you. Hope it's going to be a great one for you.
I think I'm hopeful. I'm praying for it. So let's begin with Matthew Graves. What do you think of this man's tenure in your old job?
Ignominious tenure. A tenure replete with errors in judgment, failures on a vast scale to enforce the laws in the District of Columbia, allowing a crime wave to occur, taking no steps whatsoever to protect the citizens of the District of Columbia, the business owners of the District of Columbia, an embarrassing performance. I think he will go down as the worst United States attorney in the history of this great office, and he can't be gone soon enough. And I'm sure that the people who've been in that office for a long time are quite happy to see him go, and time for a new leader, someone who will return the office to its rightful place as the true law enforcement agency that the people of the city look up to keep them safe.
It must be frustrating to work in an office like that, have all of these arrests in the district, and then not prosecute the criminals that are responsible for them, for all these crimes. Because we go back to March of 2023, that's when we got the headline that Matthew Graves was declining to prosecute 67% of all arrests in the District of Columbia. You see a number like that, it's staggering. I get it. This guy's a left-wing hack, but he's ignoring all crime? Is that as jarring a number as a guy like me thinks it is?
Yes, it is. What happens is when you have an insidious philosophy, which the progressives salute and worship, which is that the criminals are the actual victims in society, and the victims are people to be ignored. When you have a philosophy like that, this is what you get. You end up with a horrible, horrible upside down effect, and it makes the people angry. It causes a loss of trust in institutions, and people then turn to self-help, which is one of the most dangerous things that can occur in a free society. Mr. Graves is symptomatic of the entire law enforcement philosophy. Started with Barack Obama. It ended with Joe Biden and the Obama people around him. And Merrick Garland is really sort of the ultimate example of why you don't pick certain people to be law enforcement figures. Matthew Graves was an acolyte of Garland, and he proved himself to be inadequate to the job. I think the people of the District of Columbia have been so ill-served by him. It was all politics all the time. January 6th was an important event. It got out of hand. There were some people who broke the law, but to make it the largest criminal investigation in the history of the Department of Justice is a joke. It is an embarrassment. Any worthwhile U.S. attorney would have said to Merrick Garland, listen, we can go after a few people that did some really bad things, destroyed property, hurt some police officers,
yes,
whatever they did. And we also should prosecute Captain Byrd, who killed Ashley Babbitt. He signed off on no prosecution for that. That'll tell you what kind of a U.S. attorney he was.
And there's an opportunity cost there too, because as you point out, so and you know better than most that if you decide to spend all of your time going after people who were standing on the lawn outside of the Capitol building because that was a closed off zone, but they violated federal law by standing on that grass, what aren't you doing? What aren't you doing? We've heard from former FBI people, FBI whistleblowers say that they were taken off of child predation cases in order to focus all of their time and effort on this big national security event. I mean, what kind of awful things can happen in an environment like that?
Well, what happens is the law enforcement is shortchanged. The cases that need to be pursued are not pursued. The murders, the rapes, the robberies, the arsons, all of the terrible things, the hijackings, the big drug cases, and that's because resources. You know, there are limited resources in any U.S. attorney's office. And even though they supplemented his needs with people from other offices, that meant that other things weren't being done. To sacrifice law enforcement in general on the altar of January 6th is a disgraceful abuse of public authority.
And also, in terms of things that happened under Matt Graves' watch as it relates to crime, I often point out as we talk about Matt Graves that this job is unique among U.S. attorneys because it also prosecutes local crime, unlike many other U.S. attorneys, right?
That's correct. It's the old common law crimes that existed, you know, at the time of the founding of the Republic. There is no, well, they call the old Corporation Counsel now called the D.C. Attorney General, which is the joke. The bottom line is the U.S. Attorney prosecutes the felonies and all major misdemeanors like theft, robbery, murder. Those are usually prosecuted by a state attorney, but because the District of Columbia is the nation's capital, the U.S. Attorney is the state attorney. And
yes.
By the way, I've seen some very interesting questions being raised about the way the district has been governing itself, the way its police department is being run, the politicization of the police department under this current mayor. And I think Congress really does need to take a look at the Home Rule Act and make some key decisions about whether or not it needs to take back certain authority or create a different authority to run the nation's capital. And there's no better example of that than the way the city refused to cooperate during January 6th to protect the Capitol.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this with congressmen, including Congressman Andrew Clyde, has been very focused on this subject, and he raised this point, which is right now the way it works is D.C. makes laws for itself, and then if Congress doesn't get in the way, the law comes to pass. It's fine. The law and
correct.
Whatever the D.C. Council wants to do. Andrew Clyde saying, I don't want to get rid of home rule, but I do want to reverse that arrangement. In other words, if the D.C. City Council creates a law, Congress should have to proactively approve it for it to go into effect. Do you think that would be a good change?
I do think that. I think it's absolutely correct. And it pays homage to the original reason for having a District of Columbia. The reason that there is that section in Article 1 of the Constitution that creates the District of Columbia is because of what happened in Philadelphia when a state militia that wasn't being paid took over the Continental Congress. And they held captive members of the Congress sitting there. And Congress determined at that point, we're not going to have this anymore. We're going to have a nation's capital, which is going to be run by us. Yeah. And there isn't going to be any effort for us to be intimidated or blackmailed by a local government. That's now on its head, and that has to be stopped. In other words, what has to happen is all authority whatsoever over what happens in the district has to be handed back to Congress. And by the way, Congress has absolute authority to take back home rule and to do whatever it wants in managing that. Its authority is absolute.
By the way, on this front, Mayor Muriel Bowser made a pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago yesterday to meet with President Trump and released a statement saying that it was a great meeting. We want Washington, D.C. to be the best, the most beautiful city in the world. But this really, what this is, it goes right to the heart of what you're talking about, Joe DiGenova. Muriel Bowser is trying to get in the way of the very thing you and I are discussing. She wants to woo Trump and prevent the Republicans in Congress from reasserting their authority over the district.
Well, to my knowledge, Trump has no one around him who has any experience in the District of Columbia other than having been in the White House, which is not dealing with the District of Columbia. If their first term should teach them anything, it's that you cannot trust the government of the District of Columbia. It's completely anti-Trump. The citizens of the District of Columbia are completely anti-Trump.
Yes.
It's a very, very dangerous situation for a president. And one of the ways you can deal with that is by taking back authority, which should be in the hands of only the White House and the president.
And also, Muriel Bowser is responsible for painting a corrupt political mural in front of the White House while Trump was in office. And so
correct.
In order to literally be an attack on him right outside of the People's White House, and that section of Washington, D.C. has now been shut down to all vehicle traffic to honor a again, corrupt political mural. And so I don't know why. I hope President Trump, I have no idea what that conversation consisted of. Muriel Bowser said it was a great one, but boy, he really should have some animus for her awful treatment of him and the American people.
I'm not sure that he even thinks that way. He tends to be, not that kind of guy, believe it or not, contrary to the popular image of him created by the mythological people in the mainstream media.
He's a better man than I am.
Yeah, no, but I do think these are some of the things that he ought to be upset about, and he ought to take action against. And unfortunately, I just don't know if he has around him people who understand the district, who understand the depth of the hatred of him, and why it's important to take control of that. I'll give you a good example. It's not just Trump. It's the people on the Hill. They took the left-wing police chief from Montgomery County, Manger, and when they were in charge, the Democrats, and they made him the chief of the Capitol Police. That guy should be gone tomorrow. He should be out of there. And do you think anybody on the Hill is even thinking about that, about who should be the new chief of police and the Capitol Police? These guys sometimes get so consumed by the minutia of governing that they don't see the big picture. Yeah. Personnel is destiny. Manger would be gone tomorrow and put a good Republican chief of police from somewhere in the United States in charge of the U.S. Capitol Police. And boy, do they need some training.
Yeah, it's amazing. And to your point, it's I think too many of these Republicans are still being led around by the nose by the establishment press. What issue is important today? I don't know. Let's see what the New York Times says. That's not the way to handle this. You have to be obsessive.
That is absolutely correct. Yeah, absolutely correct. And it's one thing to go through all this nonsense about who's going to be Speaker and Johnson when you don't have any alternative. They're screaming and yelling about not voting for Johnson when they have nobody to put in his place. The bottom line is that's exactly the type of idiocy that allows them not to deal with the things that really matter, like who the hell the chief of police is at the Capitol Police.
Can I, returning to the issue of U.S. attorneys for a moment, should President Trump...
Sorry to digress onto Manger and the Capitol.
No,
Police.
I love it all. I love it all. These are all important topics. The U.S. attorneys, should President Trump fire every single one of them when he arrives?
Oh, my God, absolutely. You don't keep one of them around. They're very dangerous people. They're all politically motivated. All you have to do is look at the former ones from the Obama administration that are on television constantly. They're all hacked. The best example is this Barbara McQuaid from Detroit. She now teaches at I think the University of Michigan Law School. They're hacks. These people are political hacks. Graves is the best example. You get rid of every one of them. You demand their resignations and say if they don't resign on January 20th, they're fired.
Yeah.
You got to get rid of them because as long as they're hanging around, they'll do things to embarrass the president. And
there's plenty of precedent for this. Not that you need it, but Ronald Reagan did this. Bill Clinton, Janet Reno did this.
Everybody does it. With anybody with an ounce of brains fires every U.S. attorney right away. By the way, the one guy who didn't was Trump. He didn't fire everybody. He thought he could outthink the U.S. attorney in the Southern District. Eventually, ended up realizing that was not a good move. Keeping around, you remember Preet Bharara. Remember that guy?
Right.
He became a CNN commentator.
Yeah, that's what it is. I guess that's the goal these days for some reason. Joe DiGenova, thank you very much as always. Please have a very happy New Year. Give our best to Victoria as well, and just always so great to talk to you. All right, to the phones we go. Bonnie calling in from Charleston, South Carolina. Line 2. Hello, Bonnie.
Hey, Vince. We can't trust D.C. and Muriel Bowser at all. I mean, look at the posters that they just put up, 2 weeks before the inauguration, and they're claiming they had nothing to do with these posters.
Well, that's a lie. That's already a lie because these ads. So what you're referring to, just to get people up to speed, they have the District Department of Transportation is now denouncing a transit ad that was spotted near the Capitol that likened MAGA hat wearers to garbage. It says, keep D.C. trash free. And it was spotted by a guy called Caleb Morrell, a pastor at Capitol Hill Baptist Church. The ad shows a red circle with a line through it over an image of a MAGA hat wearer holding a book labeled Project 2025. And the bottom of the ad includes a logo for the District of Columbia's Department of Public Works and the mayor's Office of the Clean City program, which, by the way, is a real program that exists for some reason. Now, D.DC is denying any role in this, but here's the role. If you're running an ad on our transit system in D.C., somebody had to approve it inside of the transit system. So they don't have no role in this. They have at least some role, don't they, Bonnie?
Absolutely. And at first, when I told my husband that I was going to call somebody to complain about this, being a minority, actually a majority right now, that was offended by an ad that they had produced, he said, well, yeah, but you don't live in Washington, D.C. And I said, wait a minute, this is 2 weeks before the inauguration. This is the capital of my country.
Yes, that's right.
I have every right to complain about
Yes, you paid for those streets. You're paying for that city. You're totally right about that, Bonnie. And yes, it's totally disgraceful. And we had no role in it. Well, who signed off on it? You're running the anti-Trump propaganda ads as he arrives back in office. We see you. And President Trump should see you, too. Joe DiGenova is right about that. He should have clear eyes about this, and people close to him that can tell him, you've got a real mess on your hands in the nation's capital. Let's clean it up. Can't agree more. Coming up on the program, we're going to be joined by Eddie Scarry. We talked to him about the biggest loser of 2024. may not be somebody you expect. And then Ed Morrissey joins us from Hot Air. We talk about all that money that Joe Biden's been wasting all across the country.